Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I start by thanking the Secretary of State for advance sight of this statement and for his briefing yesterday. Hateful extremism threatens the safety of our communities and the unity of our country. Everyone across this House can agree that this is a serious problem which demands a serious response. So I want to begin by saying from the outset, when it comes to our national security, when it comes to the threat of radicalisation, when it comes to the toxic scourge of Islamophobia, neo-Nazism, anti-Semitism or any other corrosive hatred, the whole House can and should work together. The way the government does this work matters, and the language that we all use is important. And I want to welcome the Secretary of State's opening words that it is our diversity and our values which make our country stronger. Indeed, the Secretary of State is right to raise the concerns about the dangers facing our elected representatives. We must be free to represent the views of our constituents. We all have a responsibility to work to extinguish the flames of division and never to fan them. While it may be part of the nature of our politics for passion to sometimes take centre stage, and while we may challenge and probe these plans today, if the Secretary of State wants to engage going forward, he has my word that we can do so in good faith. And the reason that I say challenge is because I do believe he's made a mistake in the way that this policy has been trailed in the last week. So I'm glad that he's now come to the House to give clarification. But it is not right that we have spent the last few days poring over a possible new definition in the papers. And it's not right that the Department has leaked the names of groups that may or may not be covered by this definition when he rightly says this work should be based on due diligence. And it is not right that each stage of the recruitment of a new Islamophobia advisor has been mired in controversy. So can the Secretary of State confirm he has now appointed an advisor? So on today's announcement, Mr Speaker, we will scrutinise this new definition, and it will be crucial to see the way it is applied in practice. But can I ask the Secretary of State to set out today how the new Centre of Excellence will operate and how it will be resourced? And can he confirm how this new definition will work in practice? How exactly will it restrict the government's engagement? And can he explain whether these restrictions will only relate to government engagement or later extended to other public bodies such as the police and universities? Given this new definition, the public will rightly be alarmed at the idea that government ministers could already have met with extremist groups. Can the Secretary of State shed some light on this? Renewed vigilance and diligence is welcome, particularly in the current climate, but if his own department now needs to cut ties with extremist groups, it begs the question why they were working with them in the first place. And given he says this will not affect gender-critical campaigners, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental protest groups, or those exercising their proper right to free speech, can the Secretary of State explain which groups this new definition will affect and where the government has chosen to draw the line? Mr Speaker, this is not the first time that the government has identified this risk or promised to act. As the Secretary of State mentions in his opening, at the beginning of 2011, well back then, the Conservative Home Secretary told the House that if organisations do not support the values of democracy, human rights, equality before law, participation in society, we will not work with them and we will not fund them. It begs the question, why has it taken the government 13 years to address this? The Secretary of State says that organisations which are clearly extreme have benefited from government engagement, endorsement and support, and even suggests that those groups have exploited government engagement. Can he understand how deeply concerning this is to hear? He must explain exactly how this has been allowed to happen. Mr Speaker, we know that there has been a huge surge in online extremism. And can the Secretary of State give assurance on how this will be dealt with? What action he is taking to work cross-government to assess and confront online hate? We know that extremism doesn't exist in a vacuum, and we need political leadership on this. But a quality of good leadership is to empower others. The Secretary of State says that the Department has been working with faith groups, civil society and local councils, and I agree that they all have a crucial role to play in tackling extremism. But what form has that consultation taken? And will he publish the findings of that consultation? And on the wider work now needed, can the Secretary of State set out if this work will be underpinned by a new cross-government counter-extremism strategy, given the last one is now 9 years out of date? Will it include action to rebuild the resilience and cohesion of our communities? And he mentions new funding. How much will that funding be, and how will it be allocated? And how will it interact with other funding streams, including the multi-faith dialogue? Mr Speaker, I also want to raise the point about hate crime and how important this is to tackling extremism. We have seen an appalling surge of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in recent months, and the previous strategy is now 4 years out of date. Can I ask the Secretary of State, when will he have an updated hate crime action plan? And have ministers abandoned plans to bring forward a new hate crime strategy? And can I ask the Minister, why is the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group and the Anti-Semitism Working Group no longer meeting? We need much stronger action to tackle the corrosive forms of hatred that devastate lives and corrode communities. But today's statement does not go far enough. And regardless of how workable and effective this new definition and centre of excellence is, this announcement will not be enough. I want to finish by echoing the words of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York and their warnings that against the backdrop of growing divisions, it is for political leaders to provide a conciliatory tone and to pursue policies that bring us together, not risk dividing us apart. I look forward to working with the Secretary of State on this.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State for the constructive, detailed and consensual approach that she's taking to what are inevitably challenging and difficult issues. I enjoyed the opportunity to talk to her and other Labour colleagues yesterday. I look forward to working together in the future, and I know it is the role of the opposition to challenge, and the constructive way in which challenge has been issued today is something which I wholeheartedly welcome. Can I also say that I agree with the Shadow Secretary of State that the danger to elected representatives is growing, and it is something which my right honourable friend, the Security Minister, has invested time, care and money to counter. And can I also say, of course, passion, vigour, determination is part of the meat of our politics, and nothing in anything that we have said today should take away from our desire to see free speech exercised as energetically as possible. The Shadow Secretary of State mentioned the leaking of some information relating to our work on this. I deprecate that leaking. It is fundamentally a challenge to the effective operation of government, and a leak inquiry has been commissioned in order to see how some of the information about our statement today was shared. But, Mr Speaker, there is an opportunity for all of us, as a result of my having given the statement, to scrutinise the detail. The Shadow Secretary of State talks of the Centre of Excellence, how it will be staffed, how it will be funded. Impartial civil servants with training in this area will be supplemented in their work by studies by academics and academic bodies, and of course we will work with the existing expertise in the Homeland Security Analysis and Intelligence Unit within the Home Office in order to ensure that all our work is rigorous. And we will make sure that if a decision is made to list an organisation as extremist, that we will show our working, as it were, that the evidence which leads us to that conclusion and the judgment that we have made will be there for everyone to see. The Shadow Secretary of State asked, of course, why it was the case that in the past, government or arms of the state had unwittingly involved themselves or been engaged with extremist organisations. It's because the definition, while well-intentioned and drawn up with care, was perhaps insufficiently precise and perhaps insufficiently policed, that we thought it was appropriate to update that definition. And this follows on, of course, from the Shakil Beg case, from William Shawcross's independent review of Prevent, and other examples that were brought to government's attention. And I think the real sin would be having been told by independent figures, by the courts, and by William Shawcross that we needed to look again at our approach, the real sin, I think, would have been not to, and to have stuck to a course which had led to mistakes in the past. And of course, the Shadow Secretary of State asks about wider work on resilience. We'll be publishing a more detailed action plan which will include funding commitments to support organisations on the ground which do build up a greater degree of community resilience, and I look forward to working with her and others in local government to achieve that valuable end.